Survivors, seekers, and thrivers, welcome to Transcending Trauma, a spiritual odyssey. I'm Shari Lee Roberts, living proof that transformation is real. Get ready for powerful insights, inspiring stories, and a little laughter along the way. Well, good morning. Today we have Susan Winchester. Susan, it's an honor and a pleasure to have you here today. For those who do not know, she has written a book called Healing at Work, and it's for anyone in corporate America or elsewhere who have suffered trauma. Susan has done many amazing things in her life and career, and I want to welcome and thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I am very excited. I've loved getting to know you and the work that you do. And I think this is such an important message for people out there who may or may not even realize how much their past is affecting them in their careers. And so I am delighted to be here.
You're welcome. Do you mind sharing a bit about your past that eventually has led you to be with us today, considering what you endured?
Yes. I'm a little bit odd, I guess. And I'll bring my co-author Martha into this story too, because she and I are night and day in so many respects. But the one thing that we both had in common is that we both experienced some things growing up that were very difficult. I will tell you that, my childhood was, I guess I don't even know how to describe it. My dad was a minister in a local community. My mom didn't work. She was a stay-at-home mom until I was in sixth grade. Then she went on to become a nurse. It was kind of a normal family. And so the word trauma didn't resonate for me for years. The issue in my family was that my dad had his own dysfunctional past. And I never talk about judging parents or caretakers. I think that they have their own set of issues that lead them to do things that they don't always realize how impactful and hurtful they are. My dad had a lot of anger that he carried. And I didn't know till years later what might have been causing some of that. But the way he expressed his anger, what it was unpredictable. And it was generally things that you would think he might get mad about, he wouldn't. And things that you would think were small and insignificant were suddenly the biggest blowout you could imagine. Exactly. I mean, just over the top rage. He would completely lose control. And the whole family dynamic in the house, it was my mom and my sister and me. My sister was younger than me. Really tried to contain that within the home. But I knew people had much more traumatic experiences than what I thought I was dealing with. And it wouldn't be till many years later, in fact, not till 2017. I was born in 1963, so that's a long time. I was seeing a therapist, and in one of the sessions, she said, I really think that you should consider going to a program called Healing Trauma. I was an adult, I mean, this is not that long ago, right? 2017, it's not that long ago. And she recommended I go to this place. It was a place called Onsite, Onsite. And they're based outside of Nashville. And they had a 7-day intensive program called Healing Trauma. Because I trusted my therapist, I decided to go and see what I was going to learn. And I remember in the experience, there were probably 28 or 30 of us in the large group, but we worked in small groups. And I cannot say enough about this organization and the work that they do. So I was part of an 8-person small group, and every one of us, every group had its own trained therapist. And I remember there was an exercise that we had to do one day, and it took hours to do it. But we had to take a great big cardboard, and we had to chronicle our life through the lens of trauma. And the instructions that the therapist gave us was to think about trauma in 2 ways. And I'd never understood this. This was sort of major for me to learn this. He said there are things called big T traumas. These are significantly painful moments that they've defined 10 what they call adverse childhood experiences, the ACEs. And these things they're really terrible. They're things like physical, emotional, sexual abuse, physical and emotional neglect, addiction in the home, um, the mother being, hurt by the father, um, a potential incarcerated person in the family. They're really traumatic, big T traumas. And then he told us that there was something also called little T trauma, which are things that happen chronically over time that cause a person when they're growing up to be in a situation of um, feeling insecure, feeling on edge, feeling like they have to constantly be in a state of hypervigilance. It could be being bullied at school. It could be, like the relationship with my dad was this constant state of anxiety that if I did something wrong, he was going to blow up. So I had a lot of fears around not being good enough, deserving should get into trouble. But again, I just minimized it until this therapist said, these little T's over time are equal a great big T. And I remember each one of us, once we chronicled our life through the lens of big T trauma or little T trauma, both in terms of things that were done to us and things that we had done to others. After several hours doing this, we had to each stand up and share our chronicle of the trauma with one another, which was hugely, to even share some of the things that happened to me and share some of the things that I had done to others was really difficult to do it. But I remember when I got done, the therapist turned and looked at me, and I'll never forget this moment. And he said, "You had a lot of trauma." And I burst into tears. It was the first time it had ever been validated. And I remember my fellow group members surrounding me, and it was just this big puddle of hugs and love and just an amazing experience. And it was that moment when I really acknowledged that I had grown up with a lot of dysfunction. We found out about more dysfunction the night my sister died, which I'm happy to share that story. But ultimately, that I guess even recognition and acknowledgement that things that I experienced growing up, my dad was really, really big. He was a big guy, he was fat. And when he would go into one of his rages, he would charge me like a bull coming at me. And it's almost could hear the smoke or see the smoke coming out of his nose. And I was a small little girl, so it was very frightening, and there were moments where I thought he could kill me. I mean, it was that even though that was never gonna happen, he would never have done that. When you're little and you're in a state of helplessness, you fear the worst. And so that's sort of I mean, it took me a long time to even acknowledge that, yeah, I dealt with some difficult things. My sister was dealing with some very difficult things that added to the complexity of the family dynamic. So that I'll stop feel like I'm rambling, so I'll stop talking there for a minute.
No, you are not at all. I want to validate every single thing you have said. And for me, all of that resonates. My dad, though not tall in stature, was overweight and acted in narcissistic ways. Whether it be by alcohol or just being him. I mean, the space between life and death was very thin at times. So we were always walking on eggshells. So, keep going, man.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and it was sort of a major revelation. The other thing that was really shocking to me was, some of the research that Martha and I did for our book, realizing that, nearly 2/3 of us out there walking around the universe are people who come from a dysfunctional childhood and experienced at least one of those ACEs I mentioned. That was shocking to me was how many of us there are, and that's certainly been validated through the years of the work that Martha and I've been working on related to the book that was published in 2021. Um, but there are a lot of us who have a lot of what I would call damaged beliefs about ourselves, as well as interpretations of other people, especially people in authority, that can really affect us in our workplaces because of some of these unconscious things. For me, all of this was unconscious. I didn't know that. I didn't know I had limiting beliefs. I didn't know that I was interpreting other people's behaviors through the lens of my past. I didn't know that my coping strategies of people pleasing and perfectionism were all fueled from the underlying fear of being rejected or not enough. So there's a lot of us walking around out there dealing with these. Some people, like Martha, my co-author, she was very aware and conscious of the trauma that she experienced. She had a violent alcoholic mother and a father who worked for the CIA. So they were just crazy lifestyle, moving all the time, lots of secrets. And, she knew when she was 6 years old that she had to step into the role of adult because her mom was incapacitated, usually from being drunk, and her dad was busy with an important job. So I think that's really important to note that there are a lot of us out there dealing with a lot of painful things from the past that have a big impact on us today. But there's a lot of hope that once we understand those influences, we can actually break some of those old patterns using both the positive psychology research as well as neuroplasticity research, which says that we can actually start to rewire the neural pathways in our brain. The other part of the story that was definitely traumatic, for me, it was the most traumatic thing that happened. It started when my younger sister was 18 months younger than me, Nancy, and she was diagnosed fourth stage Hodgkin's disease when she was 16 years old. And she fought it valiantly. She was an amazing soul. And she lived for 10 years. So she lived until she was 26. And I was living and working in Chicago at the time. And my mom called me and, said, "You need to come. I think that it's the end." She'd gone through some remissions. She'd had a bone marrow transplant, but the cancer had come back. And I left Chicago. I went back to Michigan, where I was from. And my sister had stopped breathing on the Friday. I couldn't get there Friday. I didn't get there until Friday night, or I guess Friday night. But on Saturday, my sister, it was it's so many details. I'll try to make it short. But my sister called the family together. My dad came over with his wife at the time. My mom and my sister and I were all there. And my sister spoke like an old soul, and she basically said, "When I die, I want you to split my ashes 3 ways. Each of you have a different relationship with me, and I don't want you to fight over this. This is my wish, is that you each basically deal with my ashes in your own way." And my dad got very angry, of course. "No, we need to be a family." And anyway, she was very clear and made us all sign a form, a piece of paper. She could barely write her name, but she wrote it. Anyway, he left. Long story short, she told my mom she didn't want any medicine that night. She wanted a very low amount of the painkiller. And so my mom honored that. And then it was almost like my sister started to go into, I don't know how to explain it, but she started to talk to my dad, even though my dad wasn't there. And my mom and I both said, "Nancy, dad's not here." But it was like she was going back in time and was processing some things. And so my mom and I just sort of obviously let her do that because she was in a different state at this point. Well, this went on for hours. My dad ended up coming back. Then he left. It was just a very complicated night in August of 1991. Anyway, my mom had my sister in a hospital bed in her little farmhouse in Michigan. And she and I were sitting at the foot of the bed as my sister was just having this very intense conversation and talking to my dad, even though he wasn't there. It was like she was working out something. And then I got to go to the bathroom and I could hear her, and she said something like, "Daddy, don't do that. Daddy, don't touch me there. Daddy, don't, daddy, don't, daddy, don't." And I came outside and my mom was crying. And my mom said, I think that she may have been sexually abused. And we watched then for another 2 hours as she went into literally almost like a reenactment of her laying in the bed, covering her little groin with her hands, kicking her legs, trying to kick him off of her, screaming and yelling at him. Just an intense. She had so much cancer in her body, you could hear her bones breaking while she was trying to kick him off of her. It was like this. It was almost like she was reliving, I believe, repressed memories, which she never was conscious of releasing all this shit And then finally, because her body was, she was 89 pounds, you could hear the bones breaking from the cancer. She lay there, and one of the things that she had said to my dad, he must have told her that if she ever told anybody, she would go to hell, because kept saying, "I don't want to go to hell. I don't want to go to hell." Oh, anyway, um, my mom and I were on each side of her bed, and we were holding her hands, and her eyes were kind of big, and she looked frightened. And I said, "Nancy, you're not going to hell. God loves you." And then she reached her arms up. I remember, it was almost like this golden glow in the room. I'll never forget it. And I said to her, "You can see God, can't you?" And she gets this beautiful angelic smile on her face, and she took her last breath, and she passed. So that was very traumatic to witness that. My mom and I both witnessed it. It's obviously something I talk about in the book, was the dynamics that must have been happening in the household. My mom worked nights. She worked from 11 to 7 at nights at the hospital, which is when she thinks this may have happened. But if anybody had witnessed what she and I witnessed, there would never be a question, based on what she said, how she acted, and I feel like God wanted her to release that before she went on to be in his loving arms. So that was probably, but I mean, she was 26, I was 28. It was a long time ago, but that was a very traumatic experience. And as a result of that, I felt compelled, like God was guiding me to write down and journal everything that had happened. And I did that. I just felt compelled that I had to capture the details of what had happened that night. And then years later, I just felt like I felt compelled. I'm supposed to start writing a book, and I had no idea how to write a book. I had no interest in writing a book. Yeah. I really didn't want to replay any of this shit from the past. But I just started writing some stories. And I remember I had to give a speech one time to one of my former companies, a team in Singapore, and they wanted me to talk about my career. And I thought, I hate it when people get up on stage and talk about themselves. I hate that. So I called my talk "The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly." And because I'd started writing down some of these stories of just difficult things that had happened, including the night Nancy died, I had this story of leadership for the people in the audience, that actually the bad and the ugly things that happen to us can often be the greatest gifts, because they teach us important leadership lessons. And I came back, and one of my mentors said, "I think that's what you should write about." So I ended up writing a manuscript, that was all about bad and ugly experiences, of which, of course, the story about Nancy was a key component of that. And I ended up connecting with Martha Finney, the amazing Martha Finney, the most beautiful writer you could ever know, creative, brilliant, ideal woman. And she asked to read my manuscript. I won't go into all the details of how that happened, because if you knew Martha, she doesn't would not normally do that. Anyway, she wrote me the next morning, and she said, "I just want you to know I've spent the last 3 months in Florida at an Airbnb in a self-induced, basically processing the childhood I grew up in. And I feel like God has been preparing me to work with you." And then that night, she wrote me back a note. And she said, "All I want to know is, how do you go from that childhood to that successful corporate career? And are you open to some new ideas?" And then we worked together for 2.5 more years to really build out the concept of healing at work, which seems like a crazy concept. But I really do believe that while most of us consider workplaces to be origins of stress and anxiety and worry, we actually teach people how to use workplace conflict in particular as a catalyst for emotional healing. And it's just been an amazing experience working with her on that.
Wow. I love that you are at a place where you are owning your story and helping to bring light, not only to your story, but to your sisters and so many others. So, kudos to you. What I would now love for you to talk about is, once you connected with Martha, what did your healing journey look like? What modalities worked for you? And also, how do you teach people how to deal with the narcissism and abuse?
Yeah. So you are so right that the coming together with Martha was definitely a journey in healing for both of us. And Martha brought many things to the book, to my original work, that really elevated both the content as well as our own healing journeys. Gosh, I don't even know where to start. It was so powerful. She felt strongly, and I agreed with her, although I was reluctant, that we should do more research, that we needed to do more science based research. And I would say that the co creation of Healing at Work, the book that is the now published version, came to be through a lot of our own healing. And as we talked about concepts like ASDP, which stands for Adult Survivor of a Damaged Past, I hated that term. I hated the acronym. She was so grounded in no, we just need to, we need a word for us. So many of us, we have no way of defining what that means to grow up in a dysfunctional childhood. ACOA, of course, Adult Children of Alcoholics, which is a wonderful organization that I attended for 5 years, was just about alcoholic parents or caretakers. And so it was really I don't, 2.5 years of the partnership together of thinking through and debating and figuring out what's going to be the most value to the person that's reading this book, who's struggling with feeling exhausted at work, tired of running into the bullies, tired of the narcissist, leaving companies to go somewhere else and finding the same personality at the next company. And so it was a journey of healing for both of us. There were moments where I was trying to think about, how do I help people work through these things in a workplace conflict? Call it a bumper car moment, when people collide together and there's an emotional charge related to it. Some call it being triggered, being hooked, being activated. Is you get emotionally triggered by something that's happened at work. And I was also, during the time that Martha and I were working together, at Martha's great recommendation, as we got closer to actually finally publishing the book, I basically freaked out. I said, "I can't publish the book." I'm too worried about being judged personally. I'm worried about being judged professionally. I can't do it. And I had a lot of fear about being as open as I am in the book. And Martha suggested I meet with a woman. She saw this woman's advertisement. Her name is Celine DaCosta. And Celine had a one-on-one, a 90-minute one-on-one intensive. It was a New Year's Day special. And I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but the most beautiful, amazing things happened. And Celine has been my personal coach ever since. Is she helped me with some subconscious work to realize that my purpose in writing the book, my purpose in wanting to wake people up to these unconscious tendencies that affect us so negatively in our workplaces, my why was way bigger than my fear. And it was such a breakthrough, and I had so much clarity that no matter what happens, if family members are judging me for being so open and honest, if my employers are judging me, then maybe it's not the right employer. But I finally just realized that I could get through the fear because my purpose for helping people discover how to use the workplace in the way that I teach was overwhelmingly positive. And throughout the time that I've worked with Celine, she's a master coach. She's a master amazing woman. I have learned a lot of practices from her that we've incorporated some into the book relative to the variety of different ways that a person can actually go through healing. You and I both know that our body stores the memories and keeps the score. That's a wonderful book. The Body Keeps the Score. And so ultimately, when we're practicing healing, there's got to be a component, the somatic component of engaging the body in that work. And, I don't think I have this in the book. It comes later in my courses and some of the other things that I've done. But the journey is recognizing when you feel that physiological, that the brain lets you know when you need to be in a state of fight, flight, or freeze or please. And I think that when we've had experiences when we were little where we felt flight, we felt that fear, that our brain, that part of the brain, the emotional part of the brain, the amygdala that stores those memories is also the activator of fight, flight, or freeze, that we tend to have these very strong reactions to different people at the workplace that either consciously or unconsciously trigger some of our old patterns. And by recognizing that, like with the bumper car moment, when you're feeling that emotional charge, that is the clue that this is an opportunity for healing. Because I believe that when we are activated at work, it's being fueled from the things that happened to us when we were little. The amygdala has no memory of time, but it has that feeling, all the emotions. And if something gets triggered that's a reminder of the past, I feel like it's throwing fuel on the fire of what's happening to us at work. And the way we begin to process that, the way we go about the healing is recognizing, and again, I've learned this from Celine, that you have to use sound, movement, or breath to get that pain out of your body. And there's lots of different ways to do that. So the work with Martha, because Martha and I are so different. I mean, she opted out of the corporate world. She's been she's run her own company for years and years as a writer, a thought leader. She does amazing things with her clients. And then I went into the corporate world and worked in the corporate environment. She's creative in ideas and this brilliant genius. I am a pragmatist. Let's get it done. How do we go forward? But I'm also really good at advancing other people's great ideas. So night and day, but it just worked. But sometimes it created some tension. So we had to work through some of that. And as we worked through it, it was like, oh, this would be really good in the book. Let's add some of this. And so I think that the actual journey of healing is a lifelong journey. That's why we didn't call it healed at work. It's healing at work. I still get, emotionally wound up at the things that happen. And so I'm on that constant journey. But what I find with the practices that I teach is that while I may have spent days and days in a valley of painful emotions, ruminating, stressing, worrying about what I did or didn't do, I spend a lot less time in that pit of painful emotions. And, the actual way I think about this is the transformation is coming in recognizing when you're on the unconscious, wounded career path where so much of your past is influencing your thoughts, your interpretations, your actions, your behaviors, whatever, how to step off that path. And the vision I always had of that path, this was my experience, was I constantly felt like I was spiraling down into that pit of painful emotion. And unfortunately, so many of us overachieving perfectionist people pleasers, when we're spiraling into that pit of painful emotion, we turn to all the unhealthy self-soothing habits to try to make us feel better. Mine was alcohol. Alcohol was my choice for trying to take the edge off of my dysregulated nervous system. I had no clue how to regulate my nervous system in a healthy way. Alcohol worked. Chardonnay was my best friend for a long time. I got to say, though, I'm very grateful. God intervened in my life back in 2004, and I had been sober since April 26, 2004. He scared the hell out of me, actually. But that the journey of healing is to recognize and become conscious of our old patterns. Because a lot of times, and you mentioned this, that we run into the narcissist in our workplace. Sometimes that person could be a boss for someone, sometimes it's a peer or a direct report. What I've learned from Celine is that the people that most wind us up emotionally, the people that we have the most fear of, detest, whatever, are actually the greatest gifts that could come to us in our lives. Because those are the people that are here to show us that, we've become this, Celine calls it an energetic hook, where we hook into these different personalities. They hook into us because there's something they get from hooking into us as well. And it feels so tumultuous and painful and upsetting. But actually, what's really happening is that we're both playing out old patterns that we want to resolve. And so often in our relationships at work, we aren't able to resolve it. We just get upset and we leave or we get a different boss or whatever. But actually, what Celine's helped me realize is that the people that most upset us, the way she describes it is they're actually an avatar of something that we need to work through and release, that is our responsibility. And that when we feel all that anger or detest or upset or whatever it is towards them, again, that's our work to release. They're just giving us an opportunity to see that. But so often we get so angry at these people, we want to leave or we want to blame them. When we're blaming somebody else, judging somebody else, pushing the other person out, we stay a victim. When we take responsibility that I was really great at attracting angry men, as you can imagine, and a lot of really angry masculine women also. I had this unresolved pattern of working through the relationship with my dad. And so I kept finding these other people that were like him in so many ways: narcissistic, self centered, center of the universe. I'm right, you're wrong. That I could list so many different names of people that were actually just a version of him in a different body. And I kept trying to get them to validate me. Tell me that you approve of me. Tell me that I'm okay. Tell me I'm not in trouble. And then with Celine's wonderful coaching, I was like, wait a minute. This is just another version of my dad. And so I have unresolved issues here. I need to do the work. I love the holistic psychologist, Dr. Nicole LePera, who talks about you got to do the work. It's not easy. I don't like doing the work, but it's a lot easier than staying that we keep getting stuck on these relationships that feel painful. If we can look at them as a gift and it's a chance for us to break through something, then it can completely change that relationship. And we move out of judgment in that relationship and we move more into curiosity.
100% yes, yes. Oh my God, girl. Our lives and our stories are so similar. Okay, so let's leave Celine and Martha and take us into your life and everything you have thought and done to get you to today. And then we all want to hear where you are today, because what an inspirational story. God, you are the epitome of rising up through the shit. And being someone that loves to curse. I love your authenticity and honesty. But I'll be really happy when you drop the F-bomb because honestly, that is my favorite word. And sometimes, you just need to tell someone to fuck off, or fuck it.
I don't think I use the F word very often. It's very unusual, but it does come out sometimes.
Yeah.
I think that I'm very, very, very blessed by God. I am constantly asking for his guidance. I am, I'm on this journey like we all are, trying to figure out how to create a life of joy and peace and self-acceptance. And ultimately, that's my purpose. My purpose is to teach self-acceptance to create a more joyful world. And to do that, this is what I learned from another great woman, Sue Page. To do and live my practice, to do it, I have to live it. I have to be self-accepting. I have to be joyful. And so my work that I'm really focused on now is continued learning about how do you create a life of complete self-acceptance, a life of just peaceful calm and serenity, and living my life in the moment and living my life in the now rather than worrying about something that happened yesterday at work or fretting about something that's going to happen in a meeting next week. That I'm really working hard and listening to how I enjoy every single moment of every single day. And that's what I'm working on. I'm listening to a lot of books. I'm listening to I just started again The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. It's like a life guide for living an amazing life. And I just got the book. Actually, I ordered the hard copy yesterday. The book just came in the mail. So I got to go and look at it. He's got wonderful practices that are in there about how do you actually do what I'm describing. So that's my work now. And then as far as my life and what I'm creating, I am really creating a life by soul. This is work that Celine does, is how do you build a life by soul? And that life by soul led me to the decision to announce my retirement from the corporate world almost a year ago. It was March. Well, I announced it in January, and then I officially retired in March 2024. And what that's allowed me to do, first, I had an incredible 36-year career. I could not be more grateful for the experiences and the people and the mentors and the guides. And now I get to design my life and my business by soul. And that is all about doing work that I love to do. And I love working with leaders through my executive coaching work. I'm doing some really fun executive coaching with amazing leaders, bringing in not only my corporate HR experience, but all this work with the healing journey, healing at work. And then also, I do some consulting in some of the other areas of the work that I've done in the past with different companies that I was employed with. Mostly, I'm having a lot of fun. I am taking care of my body with a lot of strength training and cardio exercise. I'm enjoying my horses. I am loving my German Shepherd puppies and the work that it takes to train them. Of course, my time with my husband and my wonderful kids. I and my mom. I have an amazing, blessed life, and I know it's come from a lot of work, a lot of painful years. I always say 30 of my 36 years, what fueled my success was my underlying belief that I wasn't good enough. And boy, that's a painful, suffering way to live. And I'm on a mission to teach people they don't have to live their careers like that. So my keynote work with Healing at Work has just been very rewarding. The courses, I've got a leadership workshop, an employee course. I've got all kinds of fun things for companies that really want to look at how do you accelerate human capability and potential. Because when we are ruminating and stuck and upset and frustrated or, anxious, we are not at our best. And there's so many tools and resources available to help people create a completely different career professional experience.
Well, please tell everyone how to get in touch with you and how to buy your book.
Thank you very much. The easiest way to find me is susanwinchester.com. And then I also have a website called healingatwork.com. So either one of those ways. And then my book, Healing at Work, you'll recognize it on Amazon. It's got a picture of two bumper cars facing off. And the easiest way to get it is Amazon, Healing at Work, Susan Schmidt Winchester and Martha Finney. And I could not be more proud of it. Jack Canfield, who wrote the books, the co-author of
Yeah.
Chicken Soul, I had the
Yeah.
privilege of him reading my book, and he gave me permission to use his quote on the cover. And he basically says of the hundreds of books he's read, that Healing at Work is in his top 5 favorite because he sees it as so core, so critical, and so important. So that
Wow.
was a hugely validating moment on my journey with the book.
Awesome. And on a completely different note, but equally important to healing, I believe we must all get into places and into those things that give us rest and just help us to center. For you, that is horses. And here is another thing. I was born and lived in Michigan with horses until I was 52. So please, talk about where in Michigan you grew up and what horses did for you.
Horses are part of my soul. It's part of my identity. From the time I was 4 years old, there was a family in the church. The daughter had a horse. She brought him over. And there's pictures of my sister and me sitting on this great big horse, bareback, with just a halter and a rope, lead rope.
Yeah.
And rode, I was 4 years old. I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I was 10 when our parents let Nancy and me start taking riding lessons. And so I started taking riding lessons from age 10. I was at the same stable for 10 years and just rode other people's horses, cleaned stalls, painted fences, cleaned up around the barn just to earn lessons. And I found the older I got, and it seemed like the more I had issues with my dad, I spent more and more time at the stable. And so you're right, horses were a respite. They were a safe place. And I had a chance to ride a lot of different horses. The place where we rode had 40 acres. We could ride out in the fields, through the streams. And as
Oh.
up, it couldn't have been better. I don't know how many of you horse people out there read Billy and Blaze, the books years ago. I felt like I was living the life of Billy and Blaze, being able to ride as much as I did. And it's been a part of me ever since. I didn't own my first horse till I was in my 30s. Um, and then ever since then, I've had multiple horses. I love the horse community. I love the primarily women that are attracted to the equestrian sport. My passion is the hunter jumper ring, so I don't jump big jumps, but it's so much fun. And I there's just something about the horse that's spiritual, and they're very influenced by energy. And so if my energy is off, if I'm, you know, feeling small or whatever, you've got to be a partner with the horse. And so the horse needs you to show up because you give the horse strength just like the horse gives you strength. I just think they're amazing beings. So I love the stable where I am. I love the women, my horse friends. I always call them my horse buddies. And it's my community and I just adore it. Yeah, I was a Michigan girl for years. I grew up there, went to college there, left and went to Chicago, went and got a graduate degree, but ended up going back to Michigan later and worked for Kellogg's for 12 years.
Okay, so I grew up north of Detroit, and my dad, well, we had horses from the time I was little. My oldest brother and sister rode and competed. We had Arabian horses.
My sister did. My sister loved the Arabian horse. She had a oh, she yeah.
They did saddle seat, and I didn't like it until my eldest daughter loved horses, and my dad had them, so I became her barn bitch. Today, she has a host of Arabians, mules, and many donkeys. It's wild, but it's her and it's her therapy. So, thank you for sharing, not only that, but everything. So, in closing, can you share what people in corporate life who are struggling, whether it's their personal life, their business life, just what they can do day to day to help themselves?
Yeah, there are a couple things, simple things. And one is I have a short 1 hour training that's all about basically managing bumper car moments. Those moments at work when we get wound up or upset and we tend to dive into that spiral to painful emotions. That's I have it priced really low just because it's there to help support people. It could be that. I mean, watching the video, I've got some materials that go with it as well. And then it could be buying my book. My book. Listen to it on Audible. I listen to a lot of books on Audible. They're easy to consume, and I think I go even deeper. Martha and I go even deeper on the concepts, obviously, than we've shared this morning. Um, and I think the other thing is to start paying attention to the kinds of people that you find to be the most triggering or the most, upsetting. Just start to notice them and just keep track of your bumper car moments and watch for patterns. What were your underlying beliefs that were playing out here? For me, it was usually I'm not good enough or I deserve to get into trouble. And start noting, well, how am I interpreting this other person's actions? We tend to we tend to assign a lot of negativity to other people's actions, but all those are assumptions. And we don't actually ever really know what the other person's intentions are. We don't know why they're doing what they're doing. We tend to personalize everything around us. But when we can start paying attention to the bumper car moments and start focusing on, maybe I need to depersonalize this. One of the tools that I offer in the book, Martha and I both love it, is called asking yourself, am I sure? The next time you think that a boss is doing something to make your life miserable, ask yourself, am I sure? Because a lot of times we've made a lot of stories about what that other people's actions mean about us. And again, most of the time our assumptions, including mine, are completely wrong. And so just stopping and asking, am I sure? My boss looked at me with a negative look today. I'm sure he's upset with me about something. Am I sure? Maybe he or she's just having a bad day. Maybe they've got something going on that I don't even know about. It just takes the edge off that bumper car crash of feeling like we've just collided. So those are some simple things. I mean, just asking yourself, am I sure? Am I sure Sherry excluded me from that meeting because she didn't think I'd be valuable? Am I sure? Well, maybe she had a time limit and was only able to bring in so many people. So start thinking about things through a much more curiosity rather than blame.
I love that. And that means I'm no longer making it about me. I am not looking at it from an insecure, self-defeating place. I am taking a higher position and just looking at it without ego. And that is invaluable.
The other thing, too, is to remember that the other person's behavior and however they're acting is all about them, not you.
Yes.
Right? It's a variation on what you said,
Yes.
and to personalize so much of it. If somebody else is doing something that's upsetting, just think to yourself, this is about them, not me. Now, maybe I have a part in it and I have to look at that. But generally, other people's behaviors are all about themselves and their own triggers and their own reactions and their own interpretations. Right?
Yes, absolutely. Oh my God. Thank you so much for taking the time, being vulnerable, being courageous, and sharing your intimate story. You really are inspiring, and God loves you. I mean, keep on being you. Girl, really. Anything else you would like to say?
I don't think so. I just feel really honored that you asked me to come on your podcast and to share the story. And I love where it went. I didn't expect it to go where it went. And again, I just really love the work you're doing with people also to help them in their healing journey. And just for your audience, they already know this, but she's amazing. The work that she's doing to help people to break through their own past issues in a completely different way, but in a very powerful way.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to this episode of Transcending Trauma, the Spiritual Odyssey. If you're working to overcome trauma and would like to work with me or be a guest on my show, contact me through my website at shariroberts.org. Please hit the follow button to make sure you don't miss any episodes. I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn at Shari Roberts. You can find all the links in the show notes. I'd love to hear from you. This episode is brought to you by the amazing team at Wavemakers Audio. I'm Shari Roberts, your host, reminding you that you're never alone. Until next time, sending you love and light. Before you go, are you writing a book? My friend Randy gets people book deals with publishers. She's great. You can reach her at author1stop.com.